Hi, I'm Jeff Van Gundy, and you're listening to Thunderbus.
Welcome to Thunderbus with your hosts Watson and Bones.
I'm Watson.
And I am Bones.
We get serious about the Thunder on this podcast.
But we don't get too serious.
Bones, joining us on the bus today is David West. David was the National College Player of the Year in his last season at Xavier. He played 15 seasons in the NBA, including 2 in Oklahoma City with the Hornets, and was named an All-Star twice. Today, he is the Chief Operating Officer for the Professional Collegiate League. Oh, and he is a 2-time NBA champion. David, welcome to the bus.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
So first question I got for you, were there any fun aliases you used for hotels when you were playing in the league?
Yeah, I did. I used, I didn't learn about that until a couple years in, and then I was like realizing like people were calling my room and getting, finding out who we were in the hotel and just calling my room a bunch. So I had a couple. I guess I used to just, flip up names. So I had one. Manny was my go-to. I used what was the other one? I used Michael Scott a bunch.
Michael Scott.
That was guy from the other. Yeah, I used Michael Scott a bunch. So I used to use either Michael Scott or I would use a combination of that with Manny Scott or something like that. Keep my name kind of low key.
I like it.
David, I read that you played drums. Were you ever in a band?
Yeah, so I was in the band when I was in. I grew up in New Jersey, and it used to be mandatory to take music in school. So I was playing the tuba when I was in like 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, and then I kind of matriculated toward the drums as sports became more in demand, and then ultimately I got out of band, but I maintained my ability to just play a little bit, play around on the drums and stuff like that. So yeah, but I didn't play the drums in band though.
But you still play today? Like you've got a kit at your house and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've got an electronic kit because I've got that I got a few years ago when we started having kids, so I couldn't really be banging.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So as mentioned, you are the COO of the Professional Collegiate League. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the league and its mission?
Yeah, so really quick, we aim to become a destination for college athletes, more, to offer guys, another option, another opportunity. Those players who want to pursue a college life, but be compensated for it. We're that avenue. We believe in compensation as a right for athletes, particularly in the collegiate space, seeing as where the athletics have grown, and we consider to be ourselves a legitimate option for players who want to be in college but don't, want to go into the system, want to have a more professional based league or season to play in, and we provide that.
Is the league for just for basketball or other sports too?
No. Right now it's just basketball.
Gotcha.
Obviously we don't want to throw the net too wide at the beginning, so focus is basketball, and then hopefully evolve into women's basketball, and then other sports to follow.
Okay, cool.
So of course, this being a Thunder podcast, we have to discuss the fact that you were with the Hornets when Katrina hit, and they moved to Oklahoma City for 2 seasons. What was your first?
Right.
What was your first thought when you heard you were going to be playing in Oklahoma, of all places?
It was a shock because they had told us we potentially were going to go to Louisville. We were potentially going to go to Norfolk. So we were kind of not, I'll be honest, we weren't thrilled about either. We're just thinking about it, like we say, okay, we're leaving New Orleans to go where? And then when they threw Oklahoma City in there, we're like, Oklahoma City. But again, you guys had an arena, so that was why it made the most sense. They're like, yeah, there's a legit NBA arena that's ready to go, smack dab in the middle of Oklahoma City. So they were like, that's where you guys are going. So my initial reaction was, well, at least we don't have to play, because I think the idea was we were going to play in a college facility in those other two places, or like a convention center sort of set up in those other two places. And in Oklahoma, we were going to have an arena. So that made sense to the organization, I think, to the league. And Oklahoma, we found this out later, but Oklahoma City was one of those cities that sort of had been circled that as a potential market for a team. So, we knew all of that kind of as they made the decision for us to go. And then as we started to get more familiar with the city, we realized like that was the place that we definitely needed to be, because they had the capacity to embrace an NBA team and, ultimately prove that they could handle a team.
How did you like your time in Oklahoma, and did you get a permanent place in OKC?
Yeah, so, it was weird. When we left New Orleans, New Orleans is one of those places where, the Saints, people live and die by the Saints. And so, we knew we were sharing fans with the Saints, particularly until their season ended. The unique thing about Oklahoma was once we got there, we shot to the top of the league, like the top 10, top 15 in attendance, because the people, were excited about, I guess, the opportunity to have NBA basketball in the town, but then also just genuinely being sports people. So it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was it allowed me to, to be comfortable and really get my feet under me. Because I think my second year, we were in New Orleans, and I was hurt most of that year. So my third year in the league was our first year in Oklahoma. And so that was like a big year for me. And, again, just gave me a chance to get my feet wet and get my feet underneath me, but also in the environment where, the fans were just crazy. It was loud every single night. Because of that environment, we beat teams we weren't supposed to beat in there that year, which was really satisfying,
So you played alongside Chris Paul for years with the Hornets. Chris said of you, he's not in it for the spotlight. All he cares about is getting buckets. What can you tell us about Chris Paul as a teammate, both on and off the floor?
Yeah, well, Chris is a different kind of guy. Just in the fact that I think he's cut out of that cloth where he's embraced his size from a very early age. I think what happens with a lot of guards, and particularly guys who may be his size, not quite at that 6-foot threshold, is to try to, ignore it. And some guys are, hoping they get tall, A, B, C, D, or E. But I think Chris at a very early age, just embraced who he was, got confident in that, and, really became one of the best, smaller guards we've ever seen. And part of that is just, he wants to win, and he knows how to do just about everything on the basketball floor. He can do it at an efficient rate. And he's been able to do that from the time he was young. And it's something that he brought to the pros, playing alongside of him. We were both pretty young, but, he gives you that confidence because he knows the game so well, can see the floor. So you find yourself just, when you're playing with him, you just find yourself trying to in spots where he'll find you. And that was the easy part of my job. And then again, he's just like everybody else, man. I mean, you try to find yourself, try to figure out an identity for yourself in the league. It took him some time in terms of, his leadership style, and, then obviously his playing style has always been consistent in terms of being able to, control the team, run the floor, find guys, and keep the team in a positive moving direction. I mean, it's a testament to what he's doing, with the team now that he's back.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, I don't know if you guys still talk, but if you do, what does he say about this year's Thunder team?
Well, we talk. We don't talk much basketball, but I think just from my perspective, I think that he, it's a comfortable role for him. Obviously, I think he's comfortable in the city, but also with the team that they built around him. It's very flexible, and they've got good young guards, and Shea, I think it's Alexander and Schroeder are able to, sort of help CP in those cases where he may not be able to, deal with, maybe a younger, more explosive guard, but, he's still a handful offensively, just because he's so mentally strong. He's still such a huge threat on the offensive end of the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And that fadeaway jumper he's got at the top of the key, that's one of the most unstoppable shots in basketball right now, I would say.
Yeah. He's developed. I mean, he's become a better shooter as he's gotten older, and he's still a very, very capable, tough shot maker. Which is something that's very unique, for a guy his size.
So for us Thunder fans, one of the great what ifs is in 2009 when the Tyson Chandler trade was canceled at the last minute. So since you played with him, do you have any thoughts on what might have been for the Thunder if that deal had gone through?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most underrated what if trades. I mean, I think that probably win a couple champ. I think he's the piece that keeps everybody together. I think he would have been that piece. I'm not sure they win it that year. They got him, but I think that they get into title contention the next season. Because he Tyson at that time, I think he was just having some just some growing pains and some adjustment pains with being his size, being his height, being a guy in fashion, having some nagging injuries. And we all get to that point where we think we can just bounce back. And instead of, hey, you're getting a little bit older, you've got to change some things so you can heal. You've got to be a little bit more intentional about your rehab. And, because whatever was said about his health and it being career, altering, I mean, he matured, got his body back together, and then he's still playing up to this year. So that was one of the more, again, from our standpoint, we were happy to have him back for a brief moment. But we knew, even internally, when we realized that they had basically given him away, I'll never forget it because I think it was for Joe Smith and Chris Wilcox was the other guy. And
there wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot coming back to New Orleans.
Yeah, we were like, because Tyson was that valuable to us, particularly when he was healthy.
David, also in 2009, you had a career-high 44 points against the Rockets. What do you remember about that game?
Not a whole lot. Yeah. I mean,
just another day at the office for you?
Yeah, I mean, we just had some, we had moments, I think as players, we have moments throughout our career where we score a whole lot, maybe rebound a whole lot, get block shots. You have games. And I wasn't a guy who was ever at that superstar level. But I never made much out of big games. I think it was more so like, I remember more vividly when we beat the Spurs in Oklahoma City that first year, when we were supposed to even be on the floor with them. I remember when we beat the Heat in that arena when we weren't supposed to. And Pat Riley didn't sign the basketballs after he was so pissed. He called the environment childish or something like that. I remember. Like those are the things that probably, stand out to me a little bit more than, I guess my individual performances. And that's just me personally. Everybody's different, but I think as a player, you get used to having, good games, bad games, but it's like, the games that you win, maybe the games that you lose. Like as a rookie, I remember I lost a game for us. I had a chance to catch a lob at the end of regulation. Ball's right there, and while I was catching it in my mind, I was deciding whether to lay it in or dunk it, and that indecision kind of left me to leave it in the middle, and I missed it. But it's more so those things for me, that I have memories about.
Right. So along those lines, Yeah, you played 4 years with the Pacers and were a big part of those intense playoff battles with the Heat. What do you remember about those series? Would you say it was a rivalry?
Oh yeah, man, they beat us 3 years in a row. Got to be a rivalry. When I got to Indiana, the thing was about, Larry. When I talked to Larry, when I talked to Frank, it was about, just being steady and being a steady force in the locker room, being a steady force, an example for the young guys on a day-to-day basis. Not having to, it's not in my personality to be preachy, but I was just proud of the fact that from the day I got there, we started, aiming high, you know what I mean? And that first year we lost to the Heat. We beat Orlando in the first round. And we knew that, they were the thing, but for us, it was like getting ourselves loaded and focused on challenging them that next year. In the next couple of years, we're able to, push them, in the Eastern Conference Finals. And again, I probably grew as much as I ever have in my life, just learning personal things about yourself, coming up short, and those are some memorable times. Those were memorable runs for us, during my time with the Pacers.
David, those Pacers were a physically and mentally tough team at a time when the league was moving towards less contact. They were kind of old school, and you were a big part of that. Can you talk about the team's unique identity a little bit?
Yeah, we, again, it was just a matter of trying to, my job was to go there, and we were supposed to get tougher. We wanted to get tougher, be a grittier team than they had been in the past. We were able to accomplish that. It wasn't that we were set out to try to, beat people up. It was just a factor of who we were. We had a 7'2", 7'3" center, who, for all intents and purposes was one of the top bigs in the league during our run there. And it was, we had bigger guards with Danny and Paul and even G Hill, Lance. These are bigger, because these are not your typical size guards. I mean, I think the way we were, were built, and, what Donnie and Larry combined sort of brought in were, bigger players. And, at that time, that was like the heaviest I was in my career. I was playing it, between 260 and 265 on most nights, 270 in the playoffs. Roy was 285, 290, 295. So it was just by nature of who we were, that we were just big. And the way for us to be effective was to just use our size, try to wear teams down.
LeBron was hesitant to go in the paint against you guys. He started breaking out some hook shots and floaters and stuff.
Yeah, and he was in his physical prime.
Right. But we were just heavier. Bron was playing at 255, 260, like I said, but it was just a style for us that was a little bit slower, and it just catered to who we were. But at the same time, we allowed, Paul the room to play and be himself, Lance as well. But, defensively, and sort of our identity was to embrace our size, to embrace, what came natural to us, which was our size, our strength, our ability to be sound defensively, not to be faster than anybody or quicker or more explosive than anybody. But it was to use that sort of sound defensive grounding that we had.
Yeah, well, you guys gave them everything that they could handle. Let me ask you, what was it like sharing a locker room with Lance Stevenson? Did he ever blow in your ear?
Yeah, no. Lance is Lance gets a bad rap because he's a very outgoing, rambunctious guy. I mean, that's just who he is naturally. He's a showman. He comes from New York City, so he's,
born ready.
That's in his blood. Yeah, born ready. It's in his blood. But to a man, Lance is a great teammate. He's a great guy to be, to have on your side. He's probably one of my favorite guys to play with because, I remember whenever we had to get totally serious, and it was those Heat series, it was we had some deep playoff runs, so we were, beating two teams or whatever, knocking a couple teams out every year. Going through those, game 2s and game 3s with him, knowing like, we can't go down 3-1. We got to tie this thing up 2-2. And Lance comes out and plays like a perfect control, 13 points, 7 assists, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, hits 2 key free throws at the end of the game to seal it for us. Like, he had those types of games that a lot of times the other antics drown those things to the background. Like, if you go back and look at our seasons and those runs that we had, I mean, he was an important piece. Lance was having some serious, solid games for him. And, every single night he was just filling in holes that we may have had, whether it's rebounding, maybe scoring, if he had to control the tempo and be our point guard for moments. I mean, he was being a lot of different things for us. So sometimes his antics, kind of get those things in the background. And I always make a point to make sure people understand, like, brilliant basketball mind. And that should be, as much a part of his story as anything.
David, speaking of players who are misunderstood by fans, you spent one season with the Spurs and Kawhi Leonard. What's something that the average fan just doesn't understand about Kawhi?
Yeah, he's just not pressed. I would think that's probably you just can't really press. He's not pressed to impress you. He's not pressed to be your friend. He's not pressed to like be a part of the group. He's not pressed to like be the best dressed. He just wants to hoop. He wants to play. He wants his opinion respected when and if he gives it. And he wants to know what his objectives are, what his role is. So, I mean, that's probably, more than one thing, but I mean, that's him in a nutshell. He's very low maintenance, doesn't say much. So at times, we don't expect guys of his caliber, right, with that type of talent to be that way. But I think if Kawhi's in a room, unless you know him, you won't know he's in there. You know what I mean? Because he's just not that way.
So Coach Popovich is, of course, a legend, and he has a chance of becoming the winningest coach in NBA history. What was it like to play for him? And also, like, lots of teams try to copy the San Antonio formula. Can you just not do that without Coach Popovich?
Well, I was very intentional about my decision to go there. I wanted to learn, get in that mix, be able to be in that high caliber basketball environment, as a player. So I'm in the locker room with him every day, watching him prep, listening to him talk, going through the meetings. Those are things that, for someone like myself who, I'm a youth basketball coach, I take pride in coaching. I take pride in coaching young people. So for me, it was, important to get that part of me, because I'll probably be coaching youth sports, for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? That's just it's just one of the things that really grounds me, in terms of my give back. So it was important for me to, what I got from San Antonio in terms of order and holding players accountable, regimented, sort of work and purposeful work, but having, certain details about what you want specifically to do on the court. So it's really hard to replicate what he's doing. I think what he's done, I think what people try to do is go in and learn. You go in and you grab, you witness, again, an organization have such consistency, because the messages are consistent. The system is dependable. The system is trusted. But also, one of the things probably the most unique thing I learned about him is he is not afraid to make adjustments. He's not afraid to say he doesn't know. So, he might have a specific way of guarding the pick and roll, and it literally may not work the first, second play. And then he's literally like, okay, I need to go to my assistant to get his opinion and get his advice. I'm going to use what my assistant has. So I think that was something that shocked me, just about how, because I guess as a player, you expect when like you're a Hall of Fame coach, you got that level, right? You to have a little bit of that. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm I'm talking about, but he doesn't really carry that, if that makes sense. And that was really unique to see from somebody of his caliber, where he felt like he could still learn. You know, he's learning from his assistant coaches, you know, being directed by his assistant coaches. If something that he felt worked and then got in the game and it didn't work, he was not too full of himself and say, hey, it didn't work, we need to go to something else. He would almost, you know, lead the charge in that sense. So that's probably the most important thing that I learned, you know, from being around him for a season.
Do you feel like coaches in the league are not scared, but they don't want to admit that they don't know? Like, do you think that they feel like that's a sign of weakness?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so. I think it's a pride thing, right? But I heard somebody say something a few weeks ago about it's like the person that knows, the smartest person knows they don't know it all, right? And it's like that's like a sign that someone has, it's clicking. It's like, I don't have all the information, I don't have all the answers, but I can have people around me that may be able to answer questions I can't answer. And you can't be so full of yourself that you are unwilling to lean and depend on folks for those answers. And, you know, he does that, yeah.
It makes me think of in 2015 when David Blatt was the coach of the Cavaliers, and he kept trying to defend himself to the media, saying like, "Oh, I've got all this experience coaching in Israel," and
right.
Clearly LeBron wasn't having it. It seemed like Blatt was probably afraid to admit, afraid to go to Tyronn Lue and the other assistants and kind of like share his humility with them.
Right. Well, I mean, in that situation, it was more or less a communication thing, right? He wasn't able to get through to the players, wasn't able to communicate with them effectively to get them to play the way he needed them to play. Yeah, you got to humble yourself in that situation, because I think most people saw that from the outside, which means it was visible on the inside, but he may have been resistant to it. And I mean, pride is a hell of a thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing we know that Pop is proud of is his famous wine cellar. Did you ever get to see it?
No, but there was a lot of wine, always. Wine was always available.
Well, David, another kind of wine is champagne, which you got to pop twice, winning a pair of titles with the Warriors. What went through your mind the moment you realized you were an NBA champion?
Well, that was my first time, on top of the hill. I think I really, I'm a guy who thinks about and tries to learn from experience, and I believe experience is our greatest teacher. And so I had never experienced being on top of the hill. And I mean, it's something that, early on in my career, I was like, I don't know about the importance of winning a title. But then you get, after those runs with the Pacers and getting close, and then not being able to watch the NBA Finals for a couple of years when I felt like we should have been there and weren't. It was in those years that I was like, man, I've got to figure out a way to get. I want to know what it's like, because ultimately, again, there's a couple things here. I want to know what it's like from start to finish to get to the top. And I think the only way you really know that and have knowledge of that is going through it. And I think that, I was watching, The Last Dance last night, and they were talking about Phil Jackson, and I didn't realize he had done all that winning as a coach and as a player, right? Won 2 titles with the Knicks, and then went into the Puerto Rican League and won, and then went into the Albany and won, and, obviously with the Bulls and won. Like, so it's been a continuum. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, I want to be a part of something that gives me the experience that could take me from start to finish. So I can tell a young person, this is exactly what you have to do to not just get there, but get over the hump. So we weren't ever able to get over the hump in Indiana. And for me, it was all about getting over the hump, being able to, again, go into environments that I could learn every single day, playing with all-time great players the last 3 years of my career, watching them work, even in their twilight, with some, like was the case with the guys in San Antonio, but watching their their basketball minds work, being able to to watch them develop and get better. For someone like myself who, who works with young people, stuff like that was invaluable. So winning the championship was legitimately just the feeling of relief that, we had set out this lofty goal. We literally got together to, because they had lost the year before. The conversations in the offseason was, we got to win. We're trying to put all the, chips on the table and go win again. And it was a great feeling being able to set that lofty goal, go straight through and win it for a couple of years.
So can you compare what it's like playing with Steph Curry versus playing with Chris Paul? I mean, like the offense revolves around both of them, but they kind of do it in different ways, right? Steph Curry he definitely sets his teammates up, but he also scores a lot, whereas Chris Paul kind of defers on the scoring burden, almost to a fault. So can you kind of compare the two?
Right. Yeah, I would say Steph, there's a huge difference. I mean, Chris is a more set up guard. I think Steph is an explosive score first guard, because of his ability to shoot and his extreme confidence in his ability to make and take shots. So I think that would be like the initial difference. And, I think they just have different styles, right? Steph's a little bit taller, a little bit leaner. Chris is a little bit thicker, shorter, tough, just physically tougher and stronger in a lot of ways. Both have been effective, at their position.
What makes Steph such an incredible shooter, David?
Oh, confidence. Confidence. It's just that simple. Not a whole lot to it. He's got incredible confidence, and he's been able to build that confidence because he's an incredibly hard worker. He gets in the gym and works. It also helps that his father is one of the best shooters to ever play as well. So I think people also need to keep that, in the back of their minds when as we're telling the story about, Steph and the fact that, his dad was one of the greatest shooters ever. And so to have that and to get the insight from your dad at a very early age and to develop the confidence in your jump shot for a lot of guys, that comes last. And, for a guy like Steph, that came first. And that's a great place to be and to springboard yourself as a basketball player because, he carries the threat of the shot, all over the floor in a way that nobody before him has carried it because, his range is, he's got legit range, two steps inside the half court. He can take and make shots.
He beat the Thunder with one of those shots one time over Andre Robertson, 45-footer or something like that.
Exactly. Those shots are well within his arsenal, which again makes it that much more difficult to contain because if a guy can shoot from that range and you see the influence he's already having on the next generation with a guy like Trae Young, that again he's had a phenomenal impact just in terms of how he's shaped how people view the game of basketball.
So Draymond Green recently made some comments about Kevin Durant's effect on the Golden State locker room. And in 2018, you said there was a lot going on behind the scenes. Can you explain that and kind of weigh in on the Draymond Durant thing?
I don't know again, the year after I left, I knew that was going to be a tough year for them. I think, all three, with myself, JaVale, and Zaza leaving that locker room, was a big hole, was a big void. And above all else, we kept the damn place calm. We kept things level. I think that they got away from that, didn't have that calming presence in the locker room. And, there was a lot of pressure on them that year. I think Dre's got a bit of a point from his end where, KD could have just simply said, I'm not going to discuss anything about my free agency until after the season. He could have easily said that in November and shut everybody up. Just answer questions like, look, I'm not going to talk about my free agency. Worried about winning another championship with the Warriors. And it would have been able to push some of the stuff aside. I think leaving it open and, sort of the open environment that exists, in the Warriors environment anyway. I think he was expecting, just to have that communication because that's one thing that Steve has, and he's implemented in his system, is just great lines of communication between him and players and the team, and there's big conversations before every practice. And so, there were opportunities where I think they could have handled it better. But, again, these guys are professionals. They do what they do at the very best of their capabilities. And I think that, you can make much of what Dre said beyond the fact that he's a competitor. KD's a competitor. They don't agree with, the way in which, the relationship ended, but they put their time in together and, won some championships together, and they'll have that to share.
David, you were regarded as a good locker room guy and a mentor. What does that look like in practical terms, and how rare or common is it to have a guy like that in the locker room? It's a role that you naturally evolve or you evolve into. It's not something that I was, something that I was set out to create for myself. It's just like when I came in the league, every team had solid veterans who were just guys who were hell bent on doing the right thing. Not necessarily, again, preaching and teaching and wrangling everybody up all the time, but again, guys just set out to do the right thing, keeping the energy of the group focused on the task at hand, which is winning games, making the playoffs, trying to get to the playoffs, maintain the seed that we're in, win the playoff round, win the championship, whatever it is. And so I just sort of naturally evolved into it. I've always been that way. Just always wanted to get the most out of my time that I had while I was playing. And, particularly in the NBA, you just don't have a lot of time. We don't have time to waste. It goes so fast, and the seasons go by so fast. You really don't have years to waste. And so you develop this natural sort of, hey, man, we got to stay on task, stay on course. We got to keep rolling. We got to keep looking forward, got to keep doing the right thing. It just becomes a part of you. And, the guys who have longevity in the NBA figure that part out. Just about the pace you have to move, the day-to-day things you have to do, how forward-looking and pointed forward you have to be, on that next task, right? We always hear in basketball, move to the next play. Same thing in the NBA. You've got to get to the next game, get to the next bus, get to the next meeting. And the guys who can do that consistently and efficiently over the course of time eke out long careers for themselves. And then ultimately end up being veterans on teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick Collison's a great example for the Thunder.
Right.
You mentioned, The Last Dance and in the episodes that most recently aired, they referenced bringing Rodman in and how they were thinking we can handle Rodman and make him useful because we have a strong culture. So my question to you is, how common is it to have guys who are kind of on the opposite end that put a burden on the locker room, and like what is the capacity for a team to have a guy or multiple guys like that on the roster?
Well, I would say that the NBA, basically your talent has to match. So if you've got the talent, I think there's, obviously with all the rules and regulations, you're gonna have to figure out a way to maintain yourself in the league. But it really depends on the guy. I think you can't have guys that are not organized around team goals, or not organized around solid identities, aren't organized around putting themselves in a position to be positive influences. You know what I mean? Like, you want locker rooms full of guys like that. And I think what happens now is the game of basketball is starting to weed out, guys who aren't about doing the right things. It's starting to weed out guys who, may not be motivated by the game and the things that the game can build.
Or send them to Brooklyn.
And because, what'd you say?
Or send them to Brooklyn.
Right. It's a team that always ends up kind of with a bunch of guys who you say, okay, this is a team full of 6-7 guys who may not be in the league next year. For some reason, it always ends up that way. But you naturally, when you're building a team, you want guys that are motivated just by waking up, doing the right thing. When the right thing for NBA guys is getting up, going to practice, taking care of your business when you're off the court, taking care of your body when you're off the court, getting to places on time, making sure your personal life is not interfering with your professional life, and that's it. If you could, if a talent, there have been times where guys, a team will roll the dice on a guy who's got extreme talent, may have some off the court issues. But again, you've got to be in a situation like the Bulls were, where you've got solid veterans, guys who have been in, what I call like middle year veterans. So guys who are 7, 8, 9 years in, guys who are, okay, the lights come on, got a family. I mean, the environments are really what makes and breaks careers.
David, obviously you were a teammate of both Kawhi and Paul George. How do you think that Clippers-Lakers matchup will play out if we ever get to have it this year in the playoffs?
I think, I love Paul and Kawhi. I'm always rooting for Paul. I don't think the Clippers are big enough. I think they're a big away from being able to deal with the Lakers as the Lakers are constructed right now. I think in a playoff series, I think the Lakers' size just overwhelms.
Like, who do you put on AD between like Zubats and Harrell? Who's going to guard AD?
Yeah, and even then, I mean, it's going to be, what volume and often as AD is used, it's hard not to get in foul trouble against him. And then I think the Lakers were leading the league by like a mile in shot blocking because they are making Frank is a big team coach. You know what I mean? He's going to try to play big, in this midst of the small ball era, as often as he can. And so, I think the fact that they're leading the league in blocks, and that he's consistently is playing, JaVale and AD or Dwight Howard and AD. He's playing AD, Dwight, LeBron, and Kuzma. I mean, you're talking about some tremendous size. And I just don't think over the course of a series, anybody's really built to deal with that. Is that size that the Lakers have.
And you got a great point there about Coach Vogel, because coming into the season, everyone thought that it was just a fantasy that the Lakers are going to play so big all year, that Davis was going to play so little at the 4, but they did it all year and they led the league in defense.
Yeah. That's Frank's MO, but I think, again, when they have that lineup where Danny Green is the smallest guy on the floor for them, and they've got Bron, Kuzma, Danny, JaVale or Dwight and AD. I mean, the smallest guy is 6'6", 225 pounds. That's Danny. So that is that's a tall task, to get a basket against. If you're, down 2, down 4, you need a basket under 2 minutes in the fourth quarter. That is a lot, and you don't have a Kevin Durant who's got that natural ability to shoot over top guys. I think it's going to be a tough battle, for the Clippers to overcome in that scenario.
So you're talking about Durant shooting over guys. He's an elite in the mid-range. You yourself were an elite mid-range shooter throughout your career. You shot 47% on long twos. Do you think the mid-range is being abandoned too quickly in today's NBA?
I think it is in areas where people are depending on analytics too much. It's like anybody who thinks they can look at a stat sheet and tell you about a game without actually watching the game, is just off in my opinion. So I think the mid-range game is just as effective as any other game the other part of the game in the sense that you take what the defense is giving, right? You take what's available. If you make passes and you're getting the ball movement and you got guys that can knock down shots, and every time the ball moves and there's a 15 to 17 foot jumper that's open, your players are in offensive rebounding position, the ball is moving, it's within the flow, you got to take that shot. Looking at, analytics, and we're saying, oh my God, analytics, but analytics has never won the race.
Right.
So, it's a good tool to have in the toolbox, but the idea that you can build a team around the idea of an analytic approach, so which means removing post-ups, removing mid-range twos, it goes against what I think the game demands, which is to find the best available matchup, find the best available shot, and you can't worry about percentages. I mean, Michael Jordan played all year in the mid-range and in post-up ISO situations as he got older. If you watch the finals last year, saw what Kawhi did. Now Kawhi does, shoot the three because, again, I think people guard Kawhi for the drive and for mid-range pull-ups. But he's effective playing out of the post, and he's effective, hitting and taking mid-range twos. Same thing goes for, Clay and Steph. They don't play an analytics game. These guys were shooters their whole lives. But I tell people all the time, if you give Steph 15 footers, he's going to take 15 footers. Same thing with Clay. If you run Clay off the 3-point line and say, hey, Clay, we're going to give you, 15 to 18 footers all night, he's going to take 15 to 18 footers all night if that's what you're going to give him, right? Steph doesn't want to shoot 15 threes. So if you completely commit to him to get off the 3-point line, he's not going to play around with you. He's just going to go and make layups. So he's going to take what's given to him by the defense, and that's dictated on your gameplay.
It's funny you say that because on the flip side, you have players like Harden who will be inside the 3-point line and get guarded from behind by players like Ricky Rubio. He literally guarded Harden from behind, and Harden still wouldn't take that mid-range shot. He wanted the three.
He's in the analytics world.
Right.
I don't, again, it's what's worked for them up to a degree because, again, the analytics folks have never won the race. I mean, they've been in the race a while now, making a lot of noise, but, like I said, I just think it's a tool you use to evaluate players. It's a tool you use to strategize against certain teams when you're reading like what their tendencies are. I think it's a tool you use to make your offense more efficient in spots, but that's to the extent I think that it should be used.
So today's bigs are shooting better and more often from three than ever. How is this possible? Is it simply a matter of emphasis?
I think it's just getting to the game and getting to shoot the ball when they're a lot younger, a lot sooner. I still, again, a guy like Embiid, Embiid's going to be most effective on the basketball court in the post. And, it's great that they have those pieces in their game. They can step out and knock down a three fine. But, from my perspective, the NBA is wide open for the taking in terms of the big spot. For some young big out there who makes a commitment to, run to the rim and get post catches, and work on legitimately being able to score over your left or right shoulder on a consistent basis, that guy's going to, be very, very successful. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the young kid in Phoenix, DeAndre Ayton. But young bigs, in my opinion, is great to have that skill set. But from an NBA standpoint, if you want to, again, create a lane for yourself, I would say just commit to being a big guy. That's what I tell all these young bigs because, again, they're going to be in a couple years, people are going to say, all right, we know you can shoot threes, but what else can you do? Because, again, your bigs, you got to show me a team that has bigs shooting threes and they win championships. You know what I mean? That's my trade-off. Your bigs are shooting threes, or your bigs are shooting threes at a high clip, better than your wings and your guards. I got to see where those translate into playoff wins, ultimately championships. That's ultimately the.
What do you see as the future of the post-up?
Well, I see I see it always teetering back and forth. I see, we're going to have like the young kid that's coming into the league from Dayton, Obi Toppin. You have an explosive athlete, powerful jumper, and but has the ability to step outside. But he looks like he's going to be an Amari Stoudemire type, pick and roll to the rim finisher, Blake Griffin sort of model, but with a little better touch outside and probably a little bit better post game. So bigs like that, I think, who can do both, but also the bigs who recognize like the paint is wide open in the NBA now. It is wide open. It is a prime opportunity for young bigs to take advantage of that. And also, the last thing I'll say is take advantage of the fact that, NBA teams aren't, they're not defensive scheming like they used to. When I first came in the league, and really up to my last, maybe we got away from it. Golden State does the switching, Spurs do some scheming, but it was ultimately in Indiana's when the league got away. My last couple of years in Indiana, where the league got away from defensive scheming, like you're gonna use a scheme to guard these guys as opposed to just switch everything and depend on guys to do, to play one-on-one defense. Because of that, there's a great opportunity for bigs, like guys who can score in the post, because all teams do now is switch. If you're a big guy who gets comfortable rolling to the basket, catching it at the rim, making plays with your back to the basket, you're going to be playing against smaller guys because everybody switches. You go outside of pick and roll, they switch, you get the ball in the post, you're going to work against smaller guys.
So it sounds like you think teams switch too much. Do they do that just because it's the best way to handle a pick and roll, or are they wrong about that?
It's not the best way. So I think to me, from my opinion, it's a bit of a balance here. I think teams switch because they don't want to scheme. It's just not scheming. And, a part of it is the analytics thing that if you just have a player in front of a player and the percentages of a guy, it doesn't matter whose hand it is, as long as the hand is up. So what you hear is teams moving more toward, we want to contest as many shots as we can, because obviously if the hand is up, the percentages of the shot going in come down. So it's like, it doesn't matter whose hand is up as long as there's a hand up. So if you watch a typical Houston game, most of the game, James Harden is playing one-on-one against big guys. When you watch the teams that do heavy switching, when teams are playing against Kawhi and the Clippers and they're switching, you end up watching Kawhi play one-on-one against bigger players. Harden one-on-one against bigger players. Westbrook one-on-one against bigger players. When teams are just switching everything, switch. When I was in Golden State, that's why Kevon Looney was so valuable, because he was nimble enough to just switch. He could just switch, guard, and those are the things that the big has been relegated to. But from an offensive standpoint, you have explosive athletes like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and Paul George, who end up playing, 20, 30, 40% of their possessions on that night were against big guys. They're ISOs. We're against big players. We're against players from other positions. So because teams don't scheme, you see big guys out there trying to defend and guard guys, and because players and teams have put an emphasis on having big guys that can guard and switch, there's not focus on them of being able to catch the ball at the basket, take back to the basket moves or anything like that. So I think you're going to have this consistent teetering back and forth. But like I said, the bigs who can sort of embrace it all, but they're particularly the really true big guys, the Embiid guys, right? These 7', 7'1", like Wiseman, the kid coming in next year, right?
Yeah,
Wiseman, if he commits himself to just running to the rim, catching, rim catches every night, working on his footwork, working on his left and right shoulder turns, and then work his way out. In a couple of years, be able to knock down a 15 to 17 footer. The league is wide open for guys like that.
How tough is that for big men to guard out on the perimeter?
No, in the NBA, it's damn near impossible. So again, that's why you see teams. I mean, it's damn near impossible for guards to guard guys one-on-one, right? With no hand-checking rules and literally just the speed and the force in which guys can dribble the ball and cut. With big guys, you virtually have no chance. You got to depend on, again, having bigs that have unique skill sets and the ability to guard these guards, but then ultimately you're dependent on the analytics that contested shots, teams are going to miss more shots than they'll make if the majority of those shots are contested. You know what I mean? Like that's just one of those things that folks depend on.
It's trendy today for teams to abandon the boards and get back on D to take away transition. Do you think offensive rebounding is underemphasized in the modern game?
That's one of those things that I say, okay, analytics may be useful in this scenario because the offensive the trade-off, if you crash the boards versus the probability of you getting an offensive rebound versus if you crash the offensive boards, don't get it, and you give up a 2-point basket on the other end, tend to lean toward the 2-point basket on the other end. So coaches opt to, not crash. When I first came in the NBA, there were two guys that weren't allowed to crash. That was the point guard and the shooting guard if he was above the free throw line. But when I first came in with the Hornets, there were times when we were crashing 4 guys, right?
Wow.
But then also the league wasn't about getting out on the break. So you were having, teams with 5 guys in the paint rebounding, got, some teams walking it up. So it was a different era. I think, again, you use that particular part of the game is really up to the coach. It's up to the organization, up to the team and their decision. But that's where I feel like analytics, you got a choice. It doesn't necessarily have to overtake your overall basketball philosophy. But, hey, we're an older team, right? We're an NBA team. All of our bigs are over 30. Or we're an NBA team. Our youngest wing is 29. We're late in the season. Hey, if you guys are under the basket, fine. If you're above the free throw line or you're not going toward it, get on back. We used to have a rule like that for Roy. If Roy was at the free throw line when the shot went up, we didn't want him barreling down to try to get an offensive rebound because it was going to be tough for him to turn around and transition to get back. Already at the free throw line, shot goes up. Maybe one of our guards crashed through the corner. Maybe I'm already underneath. Make sure we're back set defensively. So again, that's just one of those analytic points where I will concede that it's really up to the coach. It's really up to the organization and your flavor of basketball you want to play.
And of course, it depends on personnel, like you were saying. Like,
Right.
Russell Westbrook is a point guard. And, point guards are the guys who have always been supposed to go back. But Russ is such a great offensive rebounder, and he's just going to foul someone if he's put back there to stop the break. So you might as well send him.
Right. And he's got the physical ability to actually go get those plays. So you would say he's an exception. Just got to make sure that somebody else makes up for him.
David, your number 30 was retired at Xavier. How does that honor compare with your other career highlights of being Collegiate Player of the Year, All-Star, and NBA champion?
Yeah, so that's a big part of, it sort of seals the chapter of my developmental life, in my opinion. Just coming through high school, basically unranked and being able to go from an unranked guy to having my jersey retired at the D1 college was an amazing feeling. One of my more proud moments of my career, if not the, because like I said, just that journey alone from middle school, I didn't play basketball my entire 7th grade year, and then basically just trying to kick it into high gear from 8th grade on. I spent a year in military school, after I was unable to graduate high school on time in 98. And then 4 years after that, on senior night, my jersey's in the rafters. So, it's just a great cap to the early journey in my young career.
Awesome. Well, that's the last stop on the bus. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks, guys.
You can follow David on Twitter at D_West30. And you can follow Thunderbus on Twitter at Thunder_Bus_pod. And of course, we're on all the major podcast apps and the YouTubes. Thanks for riding the bus this week, and Thunder up!